Hi, I'm Lauren from Zestful Kitchen, and welcome to Everyday Gourmet, where I share realistic recipes for the avid home cook using fresh ingredients and global flavors. Today we're making 3 delicious strawberry desserts for summer. We're going to start with a 1-bowl berry cake that is so easy to make, and then we're going to make the best strawberry pound cake that you will ever have. And then we're going to finish off with a strawberry pretzel pie that is Midwestern nostalgic, but done a little bit more modern. It is so easy to make, and it's really resemblant of a coffee cake. It has a ton of different layers of flavor, from the sweet fresh berries to the citrusy lemon to the nice undertone of warm spices from cinnamon and nutmeg. We need a cup of fresh berries. So you can do blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, or strawberries. My favorite combination is strawberries and blueberries just because of the texture and how they bake up. That's just what I like. But you're going to need a combination of them. And the most important thing to remember here is to not put or be tempted to put more berries in than it calls for. It's going to feel a little shy of berries because it's only 1 cup, but it's the perfect amount because if you add more, it'll actually weigh down the cake and make it really gummy and stodgy. So keep it to 1 cup. And if you have a food scale, I would recommend weighing them just to make sure that you don't have too many. And I would recommend picking out the blueberries that are smaller in size just because they won't have too much moisture. They'll add the flavor without adding gumminess to the cake. Okay, so it's not a ton of berries, but we also only have 1 layer of cake. This is basically a stacking cake. So you don't need too many blueberries or whatever, berries in general. Trust the process. So for this, I'm using a 9-inch round cake pan. You can also use a 9-inch, you can use an 8-inch square, but I prefer the round. And then I'm just taking a piece of parchment paper and tracing the bottom of the pan so I can cut it and line the bottom of our pan. If you are an avid baker, you probably know that you can buy these. You don't have to cut them out. So then I'm going to spray this. It's in your nose. So then what I usually do is I'll put it down one way and then I'll flip it again so that the bottom is nice and greased as well, like the bottom that is touching the batter. Then the cake will for sure come out. So our pan is prepped. And then we're going to start with a stick of softened butter. We're going to use a stand mixer with the paddle attachment because you don't want to whip the butter. You just want to cream the butter and sugar. Then we're going to do 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar. And this creaming method is really nice because you don't have to whisk the dry ingredients separately because we're going to put our baking powder in right away. And it's fine if it blends up with the sugar because it's not going to get activated. There will be some lemon zest going in, but this is such a quick process that it doesn't really matter. So we're going to put a teaspoon of baking powder in. Then we're going to do 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Some fresh nutmeg. Oh my gosh, it smells good. And then we will blend it up until it's smooth. I'm going to scrape down the sides and then mix it a little bit more. Okay. All right, that's on standby. I'm going to measure out 1 cup of flour. We just need 130 grams, so we have that ready. And then we are going to get our eggs in there. And these are room temperature eggs. So your butter is room temperature, your eggs should be room temperature. Just makes for a more consistent crumb. I don't know why I did those at the same time. Now we're going to add the eggs one at a time. Now we're going to add in 1 teaspoon of vanilla and then some lemon zest, as much or as little as you want. I usually do half a teaspoon, so like half of a lemon is what I would do for that. Gorgeous. Nice and light and airy. And then we're going to slowly add in the flour. Okay, we're going to finish the mixing by hand. This cake has definitely been stress tested. By that I mean I've tested it with a variety of different fruits, with and without streusel, with fresh or frozen fruit, with whole wheat flour. So you can use frozen fruit here. If you are, I would recommend using it still frozen and not thawing it. And then if you're going to do whole wheat flour, just keep everything the same. Just know it's going to be a little bit more dense. I would use regular whole wheat flour or white whole wheat. And then if you want to add a streusel, you definitely can. The batter is thick enough to hold that up. Now, before we spread it into the pan, I'm going to mix up some cinnamon sugar. All right, and then just a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. And mix that together. That's literally it. Now we just have to put it in the pan. So this batter is a really thick, very thick cake batter, but you need it to be thick to hold up those berries. So it'll feel a little counterintuitive putting this into a cake pan. You can see the flecks of lemon in there and nutmeg. Oh my gosh, yum. Okay, then we're gonna sprinkle on our berries in an even layer. This would be good for 4th of July. Red, white, blue. Once you have the berries on here, you realize you can't really put any more berries on here. So then I'm just gonna sprinkle over the cinnamon sugar on top. This is gonna give it a nice, sweet, crunchy top. Okay. Woo! Okay, it's going in a 350-degree oven for about 35 minutes until it's tall and a toothpick inserted comes out clean. Be good to us, little lady. Yum. The hard work is over. Ooh. Our cake has cooled in the pan for about 10 minutes. So I'm just going to run a knife around the edge because it does kind of get sticky. Then I'm going to take the wire rack and invert it. Love that. Sounds great. Gorgeous. So the paper is left in the pan, which is even better. Don't even have to take it off the cake. Gorgeous. And there she is. Cutest little snacking cake. I mean, that's like the perfect after school cake or an after work cake for me. Okay, we're gonna let her cool and we're gonna whip up some cream. Okay. All right. Take this off and scrape the edges with. Oh, yeah. Not a boring cake anymore. Gorgeous. Oh, she's so pretty. We're gonna give it a taste test with the strawberry whipped cream. It's a big bite. There's so many layers of flavor. The nutmeg in there and the cinnamon on top make it really warm and comforting. But then you have a nice zip from the lemon and the berries are just bursting with flavor. This is such an easy cake recipe. This can be served for brunch. It can be served as a snack after school. It can be served for dessert with some whipped cream, especially if it's strawberry whipped cream. It's so easy. It's so delicious. I've tested this an ungodly amount of times. So I can guarantee it's gonna work and I can guarantee it's the best strawberry pound cake. We're gonna make a strawberry jam, which I think is key to infusing it with a ton of strawberry flavor. And then we're gonna finish it off with a strawberry glaze as well. It's so good. It's so decadent and buttery. And I think you're gonna love it. We're gonna take a pound of fresh, delicious strawberries that are washed. And we're just going to chop them up. Doesn't have to be perfect because it's gonna get cooked down into a jam, which you don't need pectin for this. It's just a cornstarch jam. I prefer to make this cake with fresh strawberries because they just taste the best, but you can use frozen. If you are going to use frozen, I would increase the cornstarch. So with fresh berries, I use 1.5 teaspoons cornstarch, but with frozen, I would use 2. Chopped strawberries. So to our fresh strawberries, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of sugar. And then we're also going to do 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I develop recipes with Morton kosher salt because it's by weight, it's saltier than Diamond Crystal. However, right now I have Diamond Crystal. So I'm going to do a heaping 1/2 teaspoon instead of a level 1/2 teaspoon. So I'm just going to put that in. And then if you have vanilla bean paste, put some of that in here. I couldn't find vanilla bean paste. So we're just going to add some vanilla extract at the end of cooking. You don't want to add it early or else the flavor will just get cooked out. We're going to cook this over medium heat for about 20 minutes until it's really thick and jammy. So while that's cooking, I'm just going to prep our cornstarch slurry. We won't use it for about 20 minutes, but I want to have it combined and ready to roll. We're going to need 1.5 teaspoons of cornstarch and water each. She is bubbling. We're going to add our cornstarch slurry. This will help thicken it even more. So we're going to put it in a bowl and we're going to chill it. You want it to be pretty chilled before we layer it into the batter. Since we aren't using vanilla bean paste, which I recommend doing, if you don't have it, don't want to buy it, which I get, you can just do a splash of vanilla. So I'm just going to do like a teaspoon. You can do more if you want, but we're going to put vanilla in the batter, so it doesn't have to be crazy. We're going to put this in the freezer and stir it occasionally so it doesn't get a skin on top, but it cools through. And now we can make the pound cake batter. We're going to do a 9x5 pan. We're going to use a 9x5 inch pan for this pound cake, which is very traditional for pound cakes. If you have a loaf pan that's 8.5 by 4.5, then pull back on some of the batter or else you're going to have too much and it's going to overflow and you don't want to do that. So just keep that in mind. And then we're going to line it with some parchment paper. So I have a sheet of parchment and I'm going to fold it not quite in half, but just so it's wide enough for the pan. And to keep it stuck to the pan, I'm going to grease it just a little bit on the sides. So we're just going to put it in. We're going to line it so that there's a little bit of an overhang. So then we'll fold these over. So that is all you need to do. Now we can measure out the dry ingredients for the batter. And I recommend doing it by weight. It's more accurate, it's more consistent. It'll come out the same every single time. If you don't have a food scale, get one. So if you don't have a food scale, this is what I would do, is I would take a spoon or a scoop and just lightly fluff it. You don't need to aggressively fluff it or you might actually get not enough flour. So do that and then spoon it into your cup. Don't scoop the cup through or you're going to compact a ton of flour and you're going to get way too much flour. So spoon it in and then you're going to level it off with a flat edge. And that will get you the perfect measured cup of flour. With pound cakes, one of the biggest problems if you have a dry pound cake is probably because you measured too much flour or you overbaked it. We're going to do it by weight though. So we need 2 cups, which is 260 grams. So I'm just going to scoop her in. A lot of people who are very traditional will say that a pound cake should not have leavener. I am of the camp that believes that there should be just a little bit that just makes for a lighter, more tender crumb that's not quite so dense. We're adding a ton of fat in this. You want a little bit of leavener to lighten it up. So I'm going to do a 3/4 teaspoon of baking powder. And then every baked good needs some salt. So we're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So I'm just going to go in with that. And then we'll whisk this up. This is all you need for the dry ingredients. And then the rest is butter, sour cream, and sugar. So for our wet ingredients, we need a lot of fat. So we're going to do some butter. And I'm just using basic supermarket butter, unsalted. If you're using salted, I would just pull back on the added salt by about, well, for this, 1/2 teaspoon. So I wouldn't even add additional salt because each stick of butter has a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Okay, then we're going to add in some sugar. So we're going to use a paddle attachment for this. You don't want to use a whisk. What we want to do is we want to cream the butter and sugar together and maybe add a little bit of air, but we don't want to whip it with a ton of air because again, a pound cake should be like deliciously dense. So we're just gonna combine this. It'll take about 5 to 7 minutes. All right, I'm going to scrape down the sides and then add in our sour cream. You need a half a cup or 123 grams. Can't get this lid off. Okay, here we go. Oh. Okay, our sour cream is gorgeously incorporated, and now we're going to get our eggs prepared. So we're gonna need 4 large eggs. If you're using a smaller egg, you're not gonna have the right texture. So an egg out of shell should be about 50 grams. So if you aren't sure what size you have, you can always weigh them. And it's important to have room temperature eggs because A, they'll incorporate more evenly, but if you're using a cold egg, you'll actually have really big air pockets in your pound cake. So when you slice into it, there'll be pretty big holes, and that's not a problem. It's still gonna be delicious, but it just is not what it's supposed to look like. A pound cake should be really uniform in texture. And we're gonna slowly incorporate them into this fatty mixture. It's gonna look curdled. That's very normal. All is fine. We're gonna add a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Yes, we're using a whole entire tablespoon. If you don't want that much, you don't have to that much. And then we're gonna mix it. We are almost ready to assemble. Okay. So I'm just gonna leave it on low, and then we will slowly mix in our dry ingredients. And you don't want to overmix. All right, I'm just gonna fold in any extra pockets of flour by hand. Make sure you get to the very bottom, because oftentimes in these mixers, if you're using a stand mixer, the bottom will have just some pure fat down there. So you want to make sure it's all incorporated evenly. So we're gonna layer the cake a third of the batter and a third of the jam layered. So you can do this by cup measurement or you can do it by weight. I'm gonna do it by weight because it's easy. But if you are not, 1/3 of the batter is 1.5 cups of batter or 338 grams. Then we need 1/4 cup of the jam, which is 75 grams. So we'll put that down. And I'm going to just spoon it along the bottom of the batter, but keeping a border around the edge or else the jam can burn on the sides of the pan. So leave a little bit of a border. Then I just spread it into somewhat of an even layer. Doesn't have to be perfect because it is gonna all get melty and baked. Pretty. So again, keep that border around the edge or else you will have a burnt edge to your cake and I don't want to hear about it. All right, 338 grams go down again. And then we'll spread it. Gorgeous. Okay, then we're gonna do another layer of jam. I always have to remind myself to not get greedy. Good enough is good enough. The more you mess with it, the less the layers look good. Okay. And then the rest of the batter. 338, it's so perfect. It doesn't seem like it's gonna be a third when you're putting that much batter in, but it is. All right, spread that out. Gorgeous. Okay, the final bit of strawberry jam. Now I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna kind of swoop it in so that it looks nice on top when it bakes. I hope you enjoy these strawberry desserts. Let me know in the comments below which one is your favorite, and you can find all the links for the recipes below in the description. Yeah. And I'll see you right back here next week. Then she bakes. So, and cut. This is gonna go in a low oven. Yay! 325 degrees. Okay, it's pretty low for a cake, but this is such a dense cake that you want it to have adequate time to cook all the way through. If it's too hot of a temperature, it's gonna burn on the bottom and the sides, but this is the perfect temperature so that it doesn't burn and it bakes through. So it's gonna go in, I would start checking it at an hour, but it will likely bake for an hour to an hour and 15 or 20. I would also recommend using an oven thermometer because your oven may run hotter or colder than it actually says. Mine says it's at 310, but with my oven thermometer inside, it says it's 325. So then you can kind of adjust as needed so your cake bakes perfectly and not overbakes. Ooh, pretty. I'm just gonna run a knife around the edges. You don't really need to, but I like to do it for safety. There she is. Woo! She looks good. Now we're gonna make an optional glaze, but I think it's delicious. So we're gonna use a mini food processor. You can also use a spice grinder. And we're gonna grind up some freeze-dried strawberries. I'm just gonna add these in. You need 2 teaspoons of the ground berries. But if you have leftover, I like to dust that over top anyway. So if you have leftovers, it's fine. So eyeball it. Ready? Here we go. It's gonna be loud. Whew. Oh yeah. So now we have this gorgeous powder. It is very pretty. Inherently with freeze-dried berries, you're gonna have some seeds. So you can use a fine mesh sieve if you want to remove those. I'm not gonna worry about it. So we're gonna start with 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. Then we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of our freeze-dried berries. And then we need 5 teaspoons of 1/2 and 1/2. And I had already bought cream. I didn't wanna buy 1/2 and 1/2 because I'm cheap. I don't know. So we're gonna do 2.5 teaspoons of cream and 2.5 teaspoons of milk to make 1/2 and 1/2. You can also just do whole milk if you want. Super decadent, you could just do all cream. And then I'm gonna add a pinch of salt. Okay, and then we'll just whisk it up. And we will adjust the thickness as needed with more powdered sugar or milk. Okay. Pretty. And then that's the perfect drizzable texture because it will still stick to the cake, but it will run down the sides. So that's our glaze. I'm going to reserve the rest of this. I'm actually going to put, this is a really fancy fun little thing. I am going to put it in my little powdered sugar sifter and then we can do that over the cake. So I'm just going to put it in there. I mean, what? How cute is that? So we're gonna use that as the piece de resistance at the end. Let's just drizzle this over. What fun. That is strawberry through and through. We're gonna try this gorgeous strawberry pound cake. I'm gonna cut it in half and then get every bite that I want. I'm gonna go on the top. That is a perfect bite. It's so moist, so buttery. Most importantly, it has so much strawberry flavor. The jam is so fresh and berry forward, but it's not cloyingly sweet. So using a store-bought jam isn't going to work here. You can, but it won't be nearly as good because it's going to be far too sweet and not berry enough. I love everything about this. It's the perfect dessert for summer. Today we're making a fun and modern take on the classic Midwest dessert known as strawberry pretzel salad. This one is not in a 9x13 pan and it's actually in pie form and it's really fresh and it's fun. So let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to start by prepping some fresh strawberries. So that's one of the main differences between this modern version and the classic. The classic tends to use frozen berries. This one uses fresh. And it also doesn't have Jell-O because I don't like Jell-O. So we have 1.5 pounds of total strawberries you're going to need for this dish or this dessert. Part of the strawberries are going to get diced and cooked down into basically a quick jam, which will hold all the fresh strawberries together. So we're going to take about a cup of these. We're going to finely chop. And these are what will get cooked down. And then the rest of our strawberries will get quartered because they're going to be the really beautiful bites of berry that you bite into in the pie. We're going to cook this down because we're not using Jell-O in the salad. Jell-O is very traditional in a Midwestern strawberry dessert. But we're going to make a little jam. So this goes into our saucepan with some sugar. We also need a pinch of salt, so let's do that. And then we need 1 teaspoon of grated lemon zest. So that's generally a small lemon. We're gonna do most of this. Okay. So reserve this because we'll juice it and use it in a little bit. So we're gonna add this to our strawberries. And so the lemon, the sugar, and the salt will all flavor the strawberries, but also break down the strawberries so that they get nice and soft and juicy for our jam. Now we're gonna cook this. Okay, so we're just gonna stir this around and it'll eventually start to release some moisture once it cooks a little bit, but the sugar will dissolve and they'll start to get nice and soft. It smells good already. So we're gonna let that cook, mashing it occasionally until it comes to a boil and it gets nice and soft. Meanwhile, we're gonna whisk up a cornstarch slurry. So we're gonna need 7 teaspoons, which is 2 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon of cornstarch. And now we have this prepared. So our strawberry mixture is at a boil. So I'm going to add our slurry. We're gonna let this cook for about 30 seconds until it's thickened, but you don't wanna go too much longer or else the cornstarch will actually go the other direction and start thinning out instead of thickening the mixture. This is gonna be the base that holds our fresh strawberry filling together. This is in place of the traditional Jell-O that you would see in a Midwest strawberry dessert. But this needs to cool before we add any of our fresh strawberries, or it will start to kind of cook these and water out the filling. So you want to make sure this is chilled. You can put this in the fridge for about an hour, or you can put it in the freezer, stirring occasionally for like 20 minutes. You don't want it to freeze, so you'll have to check on it frequently. So I'm gonna put it in the freezer. There she goes. All right, we're quickly going to prep the rest of the strawberries. Really easy. We're just going to quarter them. All right, I'm gonna take all the greens off first because it'll be easier. And these are washed. So make sure you wash your berries. Your strawberries, you're gonna wanna quarter them. If they're really small, then I would just halve them. You want them to all be similar in size, just so it's easier to eat. So I like to do it top to bottom quartering because they're just prettier. You can do it however you want. All right, good enough. Okay, just gotta rifle through those, get it over with. Now we get to make our pretzel crust. Instead of doing a 9x13 pan, we're gonna do a pie plate because it's different, it's more modern, I don't know. We need a food processor and we're gonna melt some butter. I like to use unsalted because first of all, we're using pretzels, so it's already salty. Second of all, a stick of butter has about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt in it. So if you are using salted, just correct the recipe in other ways by pulling back on the salt by about a 1/4 teaspoon per 8 tablespoons. Okay, we're gonna melt this very gently. I'm just gonna put that on top so it doesn't splatter. We'll see if that does it. Okay, for this recipe, I use twists. If you're using sticks, that's fine. You can use whatever shape of pretzel you want. If you are using a different shape, If you're using a different shape of pretzel, I would measure by weight instead of by cup. And then I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. So we're gonna process this until it's finely ground, about 30 seconds. Doing this backwards. looks pretty good. You want it to look like, kind of like a fine flour. All right, now we're gonna put in the butter while it's processing. Now we can put it in the pan and bake it for a little bit. So this is the only step that needs baking. That's why I like to call it a no bake, because the filling is not baked. The crust does need a little bit of baking. If you don't want to do this step, you can use a pre-made one or even a pre-made graham cracker crust. And then this is going to be a little bit of patience required, because you do want it to be pretty packed and evenly up the sides of the pan. Oh, so pretty. Okay, so I like to just push it into the base and then slowly push it up the sides. It's going to take a little finagling. You might need to move crumbs around. You're going to want it to be really compact, because a pretzel crust is very similar to a graham cracker crust, where it's just really messy, and cutting into it can be really messy. So the more compact and the more you press it down, the better it'll stay together. She's finally looking like a crust. So I'm going to pop this in a 350-degree oven, and we're going to bake it until it's fragrant. It's not going to change in color because the pretzels are already dark in color, so just keep your nose aware. Okay. Lovely. So the filling for this is going to start with an 8-ounce brick of cream cheese, softened, or else you'll be cursing yourself. So I've had this softened for a couple of hours out at room temperature. Okay, anyway, so the filling is cream cheese. That goes into a stand mixer. This is going to be more like a cheesecake filling and less of a whipped topping filling, though we are going to lighten it up with some whipped cream. So have no fear. Then we're going to add in a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. We're going to take our zested lemon from before and just juice it into here. We're just going to whisk this until it's nice and creamy. Okay, we don't have to worry about incorporating too much air because that's what our whipped cream is for. So I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of lemon juice and then 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And I like just a little bit of almond extract. I think it kind of actually enhances the cream cheese flavor, and it just brings a little bit more dimension than just lemon. Delish. Okay, now we're gonna make our whipped cream. It's helpful if your beater is chilled and your bowl is chilled. For whipped cream, it just makes a more stable whipped cream. I have a chilled bowl, and I have my chilled measuring cup, and I have my chilled cream all in there. It just makes for better, easier whipping. Oh no. It's pretty dry to the touch. I think that's good. It smells good. All right, we're gonna put this on there, and we're gonna do a cup of cream. I recommend letting it kind of get bubbly first, and then turning up the speed till it gets nice and stiff. So I'm just gonna take about 1/3 of the whipped cream and gently fold it in. Just fold it in. Oh, I missed that show. Okay. You want to do it fairly gently so you don't remove all that air that we worked hard to incorporate. Okay, that looks gorgioso. I'm gonna try it. So let's get our fresh strawberries and our chilled mixture. So this cornstarch, no pectin jam is going to firm up as it sits in the fridge and hold all this together, but not hold it so together like Jell-O would. It's actually a good idea to have this still be a little bit warm. You don't want it piping hot out of the oven, or else you'll melt everything. But you do want it to be kind of warm, because what will happen is the cream cheese will actually seep into some of the pretzel and adhere a little bit better, so you don't have layers that just separate once you cut into it. So we're just going to carefully plop this in. And then I like to use an offset spatula to spread everything in here. It's just easier than a rubber spatula. And I like to create just the tiniest border so the strawberries can kind of sit down in it. It's pretty and it just keeps them in place. Okay, now we're gonna put on our strawberries. So I'm gonna get a spoon for this because you're gonna want to pile it pretty high so it has a nice presentation. Okay. I'm gonna rotate some of these so you have a pretty slice on top. Yes. And then this goes in the fridge, minimum 4 hours, ideally 8 hours, maximum 12 hours. That will make sure everything sets. Okay, and she goes. Ooh, she's still hot. Okay, so our pie has been chilling for about 8 hours. We're gonna cut into it. So if you want to get ahead on making this, you don't want to do it all in one day, you can certainly make and bake the crust up to 3 days in advance and then just store it at room temperature. And then for the strawberries, I wouldn't make the whole filling ahead of time, but you can make that cornstarch mixture, the jam, and then wait to put the fresh strawberries in until you're assembling. All right, I'm gonna give it a try. That salty crust makes your mouth water because the strawberries are so sweet and tart, but the crust is so perfectly salty. And that filling is like, if you like cheesecake, this is right up your alley. It's light, but creamy. It's the best parts of like a strawberry shortcake, but like made better. I hope you enjoy these strawberry desserts. Let me know in the comments below which one is your favorite, and you can find all the links for the recipes below in the description, and I'll see you right back here next week. Done. And cut. Okay. Yay!